Welcome to this episode of A Facilitator's Journey. Today I'm joined by Claire Vintiner, who is a coach, a consultant, a facilitator. We are talking about how we started out and in specifically Claire, how does she start her business? And also some of the things we need to consider as we start out and we move into the topic of money, boundaries, trusting the void. And then we talk about how do we have great client conversations and what are the core ingredients of those conversations that we have. So pull up a chair, get a cup of tea, join me on the pink seat and tune your ears in and enjoy this episode. Hey Claire, welcome to the SOF podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. I'm enjoying the spring sunshine.
We have spring rain where I live.
Bad luck. Bad luck.
Typical British weather. Claire, it's a question I ask everybody. How did we meet? How do we know one another?
I came into the sphere of the School of Facilitation through my coach at the time, a few years ago, Alistair Kidd, and he recommended that I check you out, and I did, and I've been engaged on and off in different events and things you've hosted throughout this time, and I think we properly connected through your recent survey on pricing.
Lovely. And we're going to talk a bit more about all of that juiciness as we go through our conversation today. Claire, for our listeners and viewers, can you describe what it is, how you do? How do you describe yourself?
Well, I describe myself, I suppose, as evolving. And my business is evolving too. I left formal full-time work in 2016, and that was a senior level sales and strategy job I had at that time. And in 2016, I shifted to freelance. I did consulting and mentoring and coaching of freelance folks for a few years. And then in 2019, I added career coaching to that as the rediscovery coach. And then in 2021, I added a new company called Fresh Futures. And through that, I coach and facilitate with a systemic perspective. And I work with leaders, groups and networks to strengthen relationships with self, each other, and the systems that they're operating in.
Lush. Thank you. Oh, so many things I could talk about there. But today we're going to focus on many topics, but around worth, money, boundaries, great client conversations, because that's something both you and I have in common that we're very passionate about. We've both got a commercial background, so we thought we'd sort of dive in there. So let's talk about the money piece and how do we value ourselves and the work that we do. Help me understand a little bit about how would you describe your relationship with the money side of your business?
Oh, well, again, I think I would describe that as evolving.
The new word of this episode, evolving.
Yeah, evolving. I suppose what I've come to understand, and I think this is through working a lot with freelancers, is that budgets and pricing is not a reflection of our personal worth. We often make it personal, and honestly, that can tie you up in knots a little bit. And I think part of preparing our inner condition for attracting clients and good work that we want to do is about getting comfortable with that worth being on the client and not on us.
Ooh. And how do you do that then? Where could you start? If you're listening to us going, oh yeah, tell me more.
Okay, well, I've come to understand my framing is that the budget that a client gives me reflects the value and worth of the work to them, the benefits to them that they can see at the moment at which they tell you the budget. I mean, they have got other factors going on, of course. We're not in an ideal world, so there are other constraints. But in essence, at that time, that's what they believe the benefits are and the price associated with that. So
I'm really liking.
So it's not about you, and it's not about your credentials as such, because oftentimes freelancing, I need to do this, and when I do this course and I've got these letters, I can then up my price, and it's got zero to do with that, really. It's the budget and the worth is what it is to the client, and so we can free ourselves up to talk about the benefits of the work and put that in the space, and it's that we can use to better understand and hopefully even up the budget.
Wow. You have just, I'm sitting here in stunned silence. Anyone who knows me knows that chat. That's a massive reframe for me.
Is it?
Yeah, but it makes total common sense. Yeah, of course, the budget that the client may or may not reveal is a reflection of what they perceive the piece of work to be worth. It is not what they perceive you are worth.
Exactly.
Oh, that's it, gold. We've done our job now. We can finish the episode. Brilliant. Thank
Fastest podcast in history.
Yeah. Okay. So, Claire, I'm at the beginning of my career as a freelancer. How do I get to that point of being comfortable knowing that the budget is a reflection on the client and not a reflection on me?
Well, I think again it comes to this inner condition that I mentioned before, really. It's about doing your own work on your relationship with money, perhaps. And sitting with that reframing. How comfortable are you with it now? And what would it take to get comfortable with it? What first few steps can you take?
And I think you say something really important there is when we work for ourselves, and you're a facilitator or a trainer, I really do recommend getting a coach or having someone to do supervision with, because things are going to come up all the time and you need to take them somewhere. You need to take your triggers to be spoken out aloud, to be looked at, to be examined, your mindset, your beliefs. Because if we don't, it's like a washing machine on spin. It will come back round again until you pay attention and take notice. And everything feels, in my opinion, slightly more exacerbated when I've been working for myself. Actually, it was probably exacerbated when I was in the corporate world, but I just didn't know that I could do something about it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think particularly my experience in the coaching world is people often invest in supervision to improve their coaching practice, but then perhaps don't invest in the things that they don't even know about, which is the part of growing a business. And I think that's often the case with freelancers. We become freelancers because we want to do the work we want to do. Yeah. And we might never have done sales conversations before.
Yeah.
I mean, I call them sales conversations because you know what I mean. I probably don't frame them as sales conversations myself because it feels a bit icky to frame it like that to me. So how can we do more of the work we want to do and attract more clients and opportunities in a way when we've never done it before? It's a challenge.
Yeah. And part of the challenge is being able to have those conversations about money and pricing and know it's okay. And it's actually an essential part of the overall process, because if you don't do it, how are you ever going to be able to quote sensibly or to your worth? A question I have is, what is the worth of your work versus your work? We were talking about this a while back.
Say the question again for me, Kirsty.
What is the worth of the work versus your work?
I think the difference is benefit and impact. And of course, the worth of the work to me is different to the worth of the work to my client.
Mm.
I do this work. The worth of it to me is because it feels good and because it gives me the freedom to choose the lifestyle that I want to have. That's the worth that it is to me. The worth to my clients is an entirely different sphere to that.
Yeah. And how do we find out what it's worth to the client?
Ah, wow. Then we come to client conversations. That's a whole new realm.
Let's save that one. So we're going to talk about those client conversations because you and I are very aligned on how you do those conversations. So we're starting to talk about money. And I think one of the things I've learned on my journey of looking at money in the last 6 months is my boundaries and what I'm prepared to say yes to and what I'm going to say no to. What are your thoughts on boundaries and the yes and no?
Yeah, I think they're foundational, Kirsty, in all honesty, and particularly at the beginning as we transition to freelance work in our early stages. I think boundaries in that space when we're feeling perhaps like the reality of this new life is hitting us face on. It's a wobble. We can wobble, and I think boundaries then can really help, but not on their own. Boundaries and trust, I think, twofold. I think. Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, can we get some examples of the types of boundaries that we're referring to so that people understand?
Yeah, so I think boundaries in facilitation, one that I experienced was around associate work.
Okay.
I was offered associate work in my early stages of facilitation for £300 a day. That was the day rate, and 150 quid for a half day.
Right, two things we just need to quickly clarify for our North American listeners and maybe some other people who don't know. An associate work is when you're subcontracted on behalf of another agency to go in and do some work with a client. So subcontracting is another phrase. Can I just clarify who was the audience that you were working with? Like what channel, what part of business?
It was leadership coaching.
Sorry, I'm putting faces here.
I wouldn't actually say it was facilitation. I would say it was training.
Okay.
Training delivery. Virtual at that time. It was under COVID. So I didn't have to leave the house.
But still a day.
Still a day.
At £300.
So this is how it went down for me.
Go on.
I was early doors. It was under COVID. So, that was the context in which the offer came. So I said yes at the time. And I did it for a short period until my confidence in myself to attract the work for myself directly grew. So as I grew into attracting my own work and clients, I needed this less.
Yeah.
And so I got to a point where I felt I could say no, or no longer. Maybe that was it. No longer. It was useful.
Yeah.
And now it's no longer useful. And I could spend that day instead doing my own, investing in attracting my own clients, and it would have greater payoff.
Great. You said it was a short period of time. Can you just quantify that, please?
I'm going to say a year.
Okay.
It was roughly a year.
Yeah. So how long did it take you to go, I actually want to have my own clients. I don't want to do this as an associate.
Oh, right from the off. I mean, I always wanted to do my own clients. But it can be a bit of chicken and egg, and it can be a slow, the way in which I build my client relationships take a bit of time. I do an offline business model, so I don't do a lot of social. I try and form long-term strong relationships with clients. It takes a bit of time. So there can be lag.
Yeah.
And at that point, associate work filled that lag for me. It was useful.
And what I'm hearing is you said yes to that associate work with a big intention that you would get your own clients. It served you a purpose of earning money and experience of working in this virtual space, and also just how does it all flow and work. If someone offered you £300 a day now, what would you say?
No. But at the time, as you say, it sort of fuel to my fire. It gave me that, I've got to go out and get my own then. Otherwise, I have to say yes to this.
Yeah.
It's, fuel to the fire.
Okay. So I think if people are listening to this, go and taking a sucking through their teeth of, she took £300 a day, which I did, by the way, at the very beginning. It sounded like you did it really intentionally. I still think they were underpaying you. And if they're listening right now, I'm happy to have that conversation. Anyway, I just think people, even if you're starting out, £300 a day is really low, really, really low. And you come with great credentials, great knowledge, experience. So please, and if you listen to this, just think back, where did you come from? What do you bring into this? Just because you've not done it before in terms of yes, that means probably the day rate's slightly lower, but I don't think we should go down to £300 a day. £300 for half a day, maybe.
Yeah.
But I still want to push it up a bit. I love that. So now, though, you've got some boundaries. So a boundary around like what the worth of the day, the worth of the work you do. Another boundary for me is the industries that I'll work in. Mm-hmm. So I don't find myself drawn to work in spaces, I don't know, government. I don't find myself drawn to work with, I don't know, defence, tobacco. Just that doesn't sort of fit my ethics. So I think each of us should look at our boundaries, like the types of industries that we would want to work with or not with. And then the type of work as well. Know your sweet spots. I think that's the other thing. Have you ever said yes to a piece of work and then started it and gone, oh no. I should have said no.
I have. And in fact, I have partway through a coaching program recommended them on to somebody else.
Okay.
Because I didn't feel I was serving them to the best, or that the match was good enough.
Yeah.
That they deserve better, not better, different.
Yeah.
Someone else.
Interesting. And how did that feel at the time to make that switch?
Actually, it felt like a relief because, it felt like a relief. We all want to be doing work that. Well, do we all? I wanted to do work that felt good. And if it's not feeling good and you're not feeling that you're serving your client to the best, I think perhaps if you can, better to say so.
Yeah, I agree. And on those moments, I think it's trusting your gut instinct. It's like, for me, it's a felt sense. It's not something that's logical. I mean, if a client comes to me and says, can you do something around finance or supply chain? I'm like, well, no, that's just not my baby. However, I've got a good network that I can recommend people in. That sometimes is a good way. If you can recommend others, I think that's a great stepping stone because you're still helping the client solve their problem.
I totally agree. And I think there's something about the power of no that helps you connect with that, so that you recognize what that feels like and you get experience of the relief that it can give you. So I think there's something about giving yourself permission, even if you're starting out and financially things are challenging, even if you're not starting out and things
I was going to say
challenging, to give yourself permission to say no to one opportunity in a year. and
like
see
that.
what that does for you.
Yeah. And then I have conversations with my team, Victoria in particular, and she often says to me, when it's quiet, trust the void.
Nice.
So
Yes.
that those quieter times, trust that they're there for the right reason. Because I've met people that, you know, they want to fill their diary all the time. And then when it happens, they're too busy, they're overwhelmed. And if we've got a diary that's full of delivery, it's great, congratulations, but how are you building new business? How are you building relationships to be able to then keep the pipeline just slowly moving along? So I think we need to think about that. So it's okay to have those quieter periods in a month, in a quarter, because they serve us. Now, moving on to our lovely clients. So one of the conversations I loved that you and I had was around how do we talk to our clients? How do we have great conversations with them? And I think this is one of our connecting conversations because we both come with that commercial background. And you said it, you said something about, you know, I don't see it as a sales conversation. So what do you see those conversations as?
Well, they evolve. Well, I would say the first conversation, let's start there. So for me, the first conversation, I usually approach with two intentions, neither of which are sales based. Well, maybe they are, but they're foundational, I believe.
Go on.
So the first intention I have is to establish the goal behind the goal of the client. And the second one is to see if they will invite me to draft a proposal.
Yeah, I've not thought about intention one, but my outcome of every first meeting is to be asked to write a proposal. That's all I want, because that's all you can achieve. You're never going to make a sale in meeting one. And if you do, that is just gold and once in a lifetime. I think I've done it once. Like the client knew exactly what they wanted and we agreed it there and then. Well, we agreed, but we didn't do the pricing.
Yeah. And if they're not ready for a full proposal,
okay,
I have stages, concept note, briefing note.
What? Tell me more. What is a concept note? Ooh.
Concept note. Well, given these goals or objectives, here are my outline, a skeleton response, initial, concept ideas.
Yeah. So you're not giving away the crown jewels, but you're not spending hours writing the total proposal. You're giving them enough of a flavour to get them excited to come back to you and go, actually, Claire, let's have another conversation.
Yeah. And none of it is priced. Yeah. It's just,
okay.
It's giving, putting meat on the bones, giving ideas, bit of energy, drawing a picture, 2 pages max.
Oh my God. Gold. Love that. Okay. Back to our client conversation.
Yeah.
So you're going in with your intentions. Imagine I'm your client. We're meeting for the first time. Can you describe the process that you have in your head that you go through when you're meeting your client?
I'm not sure I'd have a process down, but I definitely bring facilitation and coaching skills to the process. Okay. So I would say I bring deep listening, open questions, playback, and I would say in the first 15 minutes an intention to really understand, or because often the client doesn't understand what the primary purpose of the work they want to do is. That's what I mean by the goal behind the goal. The primary purpose. Well, actually, often you start with the primary purpose and then you ask, and what will that achieve for you?
Yeah.
Goal behind the goal. But the primary. So of all these things of objectives you've just set out, what is the main one?
Yeah.
And what is the primary purpose of bringing these people together?
Yeah. And you've just described a sales process that I trained on numerous occasions. So you start by describing the outcome that you want to achieve in the meeting, the objective, for yourself, but also for the client, or it used to be in that time, customers. Then in your planning and preparation, you write all the open questions you want to ask. And I really encourage us all to write your open questions down, because then you don't forget them and you've got a prompt right in front of you that you can read. And it shows the client that you are prepared and you've been thinking about this. Then it's about I also prepare. Yeah, for me, that first meeting is just the open questions. And then it's getting into the conversation and doing what you just said in terms of, I guess, a bit I do just as well, starting the conversation. Sometimes the clients just dive in and just want to tell you. And I'm like, can I just pause you? Can we do some introductions? Because sometimes they'll be like, oh yeah, we don't know each other. But the other technique I use, and if people have listened to the podcast, I may have mentioned this before, I do something called a post, and it's a verbal tool. So I get very clear very quickly, why are we here today? To connect, to have a conversation about your project. What are the outcomes you want by the end of our conversation? And so I ask them really directly, like, what do you want to achieve in this conversation? And I do that up front so that I can really hear, are they going in the same direction as I think they are, as me?
Yeah.
Or is it they want something totally different? Because if they want something different, it's better that I know up front, and then I can course correct my thinking. Because there's nothing worse that you start to go down a train of questioning and then you're looking at the other person going, she's not looking that engaged, or there's something, am I missing the mark here? Or they finally go, no, you're missing the mark. And you're like, oh God. So I think asking questions, asking what they want to achieve in that hour. And then the structure, and the S and the T of post is structure and time. So if someone does arrive late into your Zoom room, into your MS Teams room, do check how long they've got available.
Nice.
Don't assume that you've got a full hour. This is an old buyer's technique. When we used to do face-to-face meetings, they would keep you waiting outside their offices or sat in reception. And so when you would finally be allowed in to go and talk to the buyer, that was really important that you sense check. We were going to start the conversation at 1. It's now 1:15. How long do you have today? And just checking. Don't make assumptions. And then it's like you said, going into questioning.
I love that, Kirsty. Yeah, be really curious. I mean, be curious in that meeting is what I would say. Your
mindset, and keep asking questions. And then, yes, you've got questions written down, but then I think you need to probe on the answers that you're getting.
Agree.
Another thing I was just thinking as well that I would do in all my meetings, I'm waving my pen around, people, if you're listening, you need to write notes.
Oh, yes.
Got to write things down.
And I would say, I often ask if we're Zooming it or something, that we record so that I can go back if I'm then developing a concept note.
I've started to play with the AI tool on Zoom.
Nice. How's that going?
It does summarize things in a really weird way sometimes. I laugh more than I go, oh, yeah, that's right. But I've just discovered you can edit it in the back office of Zoom. So that is, I'm still writing my notes. It's never going to take away, because I find writing the notes makes me process. So you said something else. So you're like, I've got a curious mind. I'm asking open questions. You also said I'm playing back, summarizing. Can you just describe what's that about?
Yes. So, summarizing and paraphrasing, particularly around objectives, and so that they hear what they've said. And so you sense check your understanding at the same time of what they've said. It gives them a second chance to say, well, almost, but not quite.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And what do you notice the client is doing when you're summarizing to them?
I think I like to think what they're doing is in their mind, because I tend to do that mostly around benefits and impact, because that's really the bit that I'm gunning for.
Yeah.
That they are weighing it up in their minds. Oh yeah, oh, I'm trying to build a bit of excitement. So I might do that mostly for the things that feel important to me, that I want to build excitement around, so that we fill the space with that energy and excitement.
That's interesting. I use summaries in two ways. I use them if I know I've got, say, 3 topics that I want to cover by asking questions. When I get to the end of a particular topic, I summarize what I've heard and use it as a segue into the next topic.
Nice.
And I use language like, I just want to check I've heard you. Da, 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 da. And then I see them nodding.
Yeah.
And then they'll often give me a yes. Or to your point, they might go, oh no, what I meant was. Or the third option is, oh, I've got something else I need to tell you.
Yes, and. Yeah, yes, lovely.
And then, so I use it as segues through the questioning phase of my meeting. And then when I want to move from questioning to some ideas, I do a sort of an overall summary. And I say something like, so what I've heard you tell me is, and then I play back some of the bigger messages in their words.
Yeah.
So I don't translate into Kirsty, but I keep it in their words because they'll understand it. And then I got taught to ask the question, have I missed anything?
Yes.
Which is lovely.
It is a lovely question. And a question I ask, you tell me what you think of this, Kirsty. Go on. I ask the question, why, how exactly do I ask it? And what are the benefits to you of an external facilitator in doing this?
Ooh, I like that question.
Because oftentimes, particularly in big organizations, they've got people, or they think they've got people who can do the facilitation. Yeah. So they've come to you for something extra.
Yeah.
And it'd be good to know what that is.
Do you, once you've asked all your questions and you're thinking, and I'm getting a grip on this, what do you do next in the meeting?
Once I feel we've got the picture, I think there's a killer question.
Tell us.
I think there's a killer question that you shared with me, actually, Kirsty.
What's that?
And it's a lovely question. I'm going to give your question back to you. Okay. Your killer question is, what might be the next logical step?
Yes. I'd put a step in between all of that question.
Okay.
I go, so I've summarized back what they've told me. And then, any clients listening to this, I then go, on the fly, here are some thoughts. But I know what the thoughts are already most of the time, because there's some commonalities. And so I say to them, look, what I'm thinking is something about a diagnostic, something about some design, something about the delivery, and cover off their key needs. And I'm looking for their responses, and then I'm linking what they've said in their answers. So you told me that you're looking to understand the organization's thoughts on A, B, and C. So if we do a diagnostic, this is the type of thing I'm thinking. And then we sort of go all through that. And I'm just sense checking.
Yeah.
Is this where they want to go? And again, we say in English, you wet their whistle. You wet their appetite. Wet their whistle.
Wet their whistle.
Wet their appetite. Claire, you can't think like that. I'm leaving this in. Whet their appetite. WHET.
Yes.
I don't mind.
Well, that's the same as my point of building the excitement, giving them a picture, isn't it?
Yeah. And then the next logical question. Actually, I'll tell you one question we've not spoken about that comes before the suggestions. What's your budget?
I said, yeah, okay. You put it before suggestions.
Yeah. I do. Where do you put it?
I think I probably put it after the picture, after the whetting of the appetite.
Oh my God, the innuendo is going through my head. Okay. What makes you put it there?
Because I suppose in my mind, and this is probably not true, but in my mind, I'd like to think that budget has a little bit of flex in it. And if I've given them a picture, they might then give me the upper quote rather than the lower quote.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I like that as well. I'll play with that. Yeah, and then definitely towards the end, the killer question of what's the next logical step? Because I think it gives them the perceived power in the conversation.
Yeah, it hands it back to them.
Yeah.
But without it's not too direct.
Yeah.
And actually they might have a step that you haven't thought of.
Yeah. It definitely helps because they can then name what they need. I once did an annual conference for a big negotiation skills company. I think I've spoken about this before. And I was talking to the MD, the owner of the business, and we did a conversation like this. And then at the end, I said, "So what's the next logical step?" And he just roared with laughter at me. He was just like, "Oh my goodness me, what a question!" And I just laughed. I said, "Well, come on, surely you expect me to ask a question like that?" He said, "No, I do." I was like, "Well, that's a good thing." So that felt like an endorsement that I was doing the right thing. So it's definitely a useful question. Like, what's the next?
It's a great question. And Kirsty, just circling back to that, what's the budget question? I suppose for me, I've already asked a question. An important question that helps me understand that budget question is something around time involvement. How long do they see the program or the event or the being? I really want to understand that before I hear what the budget is, because that gives me the context of understanding.
Yeah.
And then it also gives me the chance to say back to the client, that's quite ambitious in that amount of time.
That's a good, I'd not thought about that. So what's the question you ask about time? So we catch it.
You're bringing people together for this often. What's the time commitment you're asking of people for this work?
Love it. Yeah, because then you use that as a gauge.
Yeah.
For potentially what it is going to take.
Exactly. So in my mind, by the time they've said the budget, in my mind, I'm like, okay, if I've got then it's given me the chance to give my price in my head.
How do you decide whether you're going to write a proposal or a concept note?
I think it often depends on how formed the client's needs are, or ideas and objectives. It depends how early they've come to me in their own thinking process. I think it also depends on their response to what's the next logical step.
Okay.
If they're a little bit hands off, then it allows me to lean in with something small.
Yeah.
And say, how about if I draft a concept note and you can share it more widely within your network?
Yeah.
The decision makers.
Nice. I love it. So I think what we're saying is when we go into any client meeting, especially the first couple of the briefings, is what are your intentions? So get clear on your own intention, and also what's the outcome you want to achieve through that conversation. Have your questions, please write them down. Know the key topics that you want to explore, and then have pen, paper, or device that you write things down on, and it's really tuning in your ears and listening and writing. Another thing we talked about actually was how do you build rapport with people during those conversations?
Well, as a coach, and as we're all facilitators, we know the power of deep listening. So I would say that.
Mm-hmm.
I would also say warmth and joy, but I say that in response to a lot of things. A lot of my clients, particularly in the work of Fresh Futures, are really wanting to tackle quite important, serious, complex work.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean we can't bring humour and joy to that.
Yeah. And how do you do that in a client meeting?
Do you not just chit chat?
Do you not just chit chat?
Do you not
Do you not
just
just do
chit-chat?
it?
Just chit chat? I don't know.
But yeah,
Small talk?
there is an element of small talk. I think it's tone of voice, it's topics of choice, it's creating the space to have those different types of conversation. I think it's also flexing our styles to the client. So some clients would just want to get down to it and start talking, and others want to have the chit chat, and it's flexing to what they would like in the first instance. Because I think if I went in on small talk and chit chat with some of my clients, that would just blow their heads up and frustrate them.
Okay.
But I know I can do that at the end of a conversation.
So maybe I'm coming from a different place in that oftentimes I've known my clients for quite a long time, and
right.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, but I've still got ones I've known for a long time. I've got a Russian man that I work with. He's based in Europe now, and he's very just straight to the point. There is my 2 or 3 sentences of chit chat. But I think rapport building is just probably an innate behavior that many people have in the world of facilitation, training, and coaching. And it is an opportunity you need to build rapport with people as you're having these great conversations, in my humble opinion.
I agree. And I would also say there's cultural differences if you've got clients globally as well to the chit chat. I think maybe Brits are more open to chit chat than other cultures. Yeah. But that doesn't mean there can't be warmth.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, I think again it goes back to your mindset and how you're choosing to show up in that conversation and in that moment, for sure.
Yeah, agree.
We had one more topic we were going to talk about, which was winning work on quality, and the quality of our work. How does that happen?
Yeah. I mean, I have a background in consulting, in engineering and scientific consulting, and the great goal there was to win work on quality, not on price, because delivering work on price is hard. It's hard to do. And if any facilitators here are working with charities, I've done work with charities as well, when budgets are super tiny, delivering their work to the price is very, very challenging.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think if you're choosing to work in charity and NGO, there's an ethics and a values piece, and it's not about the price. So there is something else that is driving the decision making to be there.
Yes,
is my perception. Happy for someone to tell me otherwise, but I get a sense that that's what it is.
Yes, true. But we all need to live.
Yep, definitely.
And going back to our earlier conversation in this piece, I would say then that the goal is to secure work on quality rather than price, and to make the case for you based on quality, not on price.
How do you do that?
Well, you've had this fantastic client conversation, and you've got the goal behind the goal, and you've understood the benefits and the impacts that this work is going to have for them. You may have gently challenged the client a little bit about what they can achieve in the time, what's possible to achieve in the time, or what's possible to achieve for the budget. Hopefully you've got that sort of report, and that might not be in the first meeting. In fact, very unlikely. It's probably later. But you have to develop a compelling proposition that really speaks to and aligns to the client's primary purpose for bringing people together, their objectives, the benefits and the impacts of the work. That's what you need to speak to. I think a lot of times we tend to perhaps over speak from our personal, again, going back to this personal worth piece, we'd say, I've got this, I've done this, but really the compelling proposition is not about trying to say I'm the best. It's about trying to develop a bigger picture that aligns to the client, where the client is coming from.
Okay. I like that. It sounded like you had some headings in your head about what's in your compelling proposition.
Oh,
do I have
standard format?
Yeah. Do you have a way of writing it?
No, I don't. But I suppose I take the view that, there are many factors in decision making. And sometimes I ask the client, if I'm not getting a lot of clarity, what are the criteria for evaluation of the proposal?
Great question. Definitely.
Particularly if there are, they've asked others as well. If you're, and that, you want to know that, what is the criteria in which they're evaluating? And sometimes that does change when they're doing it, but it's, knowing that when you're writing is important.
Definitely.
Yes, I suppose I give the outline. Sometimes I do the outcomes through each stage, and sometimes I do it as a long bit at the bottom.
Okay. I heard you say, speak to the outcomes, their needs, the benefits, and the impact it will have.
Yeah. I probably don't write those as headings.
But that's the language that comes.
That comes.
Nice. Do you know what you just said about asking the parameters that are decisions, how they make a decision? And I had a heartbreaking conversation with a government agency this week, and they said price, lowest price wins. And I just went, I was having a great conversation with the stakeholder, and I was like, that is so sad. And she even told me what the lowest price was, and I said, I can't play to that. No. And I said, but the quality, we know that just because it's low price doesn't mean you're going to get the quality. And she said, but that's what I'm told I have to go on. Oh, broke my heart.
Broke your heart, but freed you up time.
Yeah.
Because if you'd have bidded and not known that and put the time into the proposal development and all of that.
Absolutely. So another reason to ask the budget question. Another reason to ask that. How do you make decisions? So, yeah, it happens. But again, it's like one of those moments that you go, well, they're not the right client for me. It's not the right space for me, and that's okay, because there'll be something else that comes along. As you said, you're freed up. Claire, I always ask my guests some quick fire questions. Are you up for some quick fire questions?
Sure.
And I've got to find the quick fire questions, but hey. Well, the first one is, who are you following in the world of social media land that interests you and you think others should know about?
Okay. I'm not big on social media personally. As I was saying, I've got an offline business model mostly, but I would say, can we count podcasts as social?
Yeah.
I am big on podcasts, and a podcast that I've really been enjoying is Things Fell Apart by John Ronson on BBC Sounds. Okay. It's the human stories behind the culture wars. Fascinating. Okay,
I'll take that one. What advice would you give someone starting out?
The advice I would give is that you may experience feast and famine, but trust that feast will come again.
Beautiful. And that is so true as well. So true. What book would you recommend? You might be reading a book at this time.
Oh, I've just finished a really beautiful book, actually, called Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan.
Okay.
And it's a short story based in Ireland. I'm British Irish, so it really it really describes Ireland beautifully. Well, beautifully? Yeah, evocatively, I would say. And it's actually about to be made into a film by with Cillian Murphy. So there's my recommendation.
Oh, there's a reason to read it and then watch the film.
Exactly.
I love that. And if you're able to, have you got an example of how you've invested either in yourself or in your business to help you move forward?
I'm going to say that I continue to invest in joy. And joy for me is travel and food and spending time with family and friends. And I think that then carries over into my work.
Lush. Claire, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have this conversation with you. Yeah, appreciate your time.
Thanks so much for inviting me, Kirsty.